Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Smart Cities Marketplace webinar on the decarbonization of mobility. So today it's all about mobility, from cities to startups. We'll have a multidisciplinary approach to the decarbonization of this sector. So by the end of this webinar, we hope you have enough inspiration to start your mobility projects. So without further ado, let's go and have a look at the agenda for today. So we will start by a knowledge block by Stefano Borgato, who will present the costs and benefits of the sustainable urban transition of different policy measures, of different contexts. We will then give the stage to the city of Vila de Cans, where they will showcase three of their ongoing initiatives to achieve carbon neutrality. We will then move over to Tommaso Busso from Bankers Without Boundaries, a partner of the Smart Cities Marketplace, where he will teach you about financing strategies for city projects, mainly sustainable urban mobility plans. And then we will wrap up by two pitches from ready to market, ready to be implemented solutions in urban mobility, a carpooling solution for daily commuting that goes by Caros Mobility, presented by Anes Enrico, and a gamification reward solution to reward cycling and public transport usage called Pinbike, and it will be presented by Ricardo Evoli. So without further ado, let's start by a couple of words on the Smart Cities Marketplace, who we are and what do we do. So the Smart Cities Marketplace, we are facilitating this webinar, as you may have understood by now, and we are a non-commercial DG initiative that supports cities and towns with their city projects. So we support organizations or cities or consortium of cities or even other entities, as long as they have a commitment letter of a city, in projects in the areas of mobility, energy, and ICT. This support, which I will present next, is totally free of cost, of course. So what problems can we help you solving? Well, we know that money is often centralized in bigger cities, in big urban centers, and that its redistribution is not often fair, easy, and accessible, especially for more rural areas, where, of course, there is less people and where it's harder to attract and maintain talent and human resources. Moreover, this isolation of the innovation bubbles, if we may, especially in small and mid-sized cities, makes it hard to be a part of a network that has the right solutions for your project. So hence creating a lack of cooperation with the private sector. This, together with other issues, creates problems that are not always easy to solve, especially knowing how hard it might be to navigate this European Union initiative ecosystem. And that's where the Smart Cities Marketplace entered, because we target exactly these small and mid-sized cities. How? What do we do? What exactly do we offer? How can you benefit from what we do? So we have a set of tailored services, totally free of cost, ranging from matchmaking events, a space to network with cities, technical providers, and investors. These are physical events that happen all throughout the year. We have an upcoming one in the Smart City Expo World Congress in Barcelona from the 7th to 9th of November. So if you want to have a chat, we will be there. All the way to, we also provide you with financing masterclasses. These are 2-day sessions to learn the basics about financing city projects. Webinars just like this, where we provide you the opportunity to get inspired with other cities, other companies, retrieve knowledge, if you will. We can offer you also one-on-one technical consultancy, where we deploy experts to tackle technical, financial, and legal issues that you might be encountering as a project owner. We deploy our network of experts, and we support you. In the end, we give you a couple of helping hands, if you will. We can also provide you with peer-to-peer exchanges. So we scan for fellow cities that are implementing similar projects, and we facilitate this exchange where you can learn from other cities, other peers. And finally, lastly, we can provide you with deal meetings with investors. So we have a network of investors ready to be deployed for mature projects, for projects that are in the phase of financing. So in the end, we increase your chances of getting investment through public and private entities, from VCs to banks and funds. As I said, we have a network of investors that is ready to be deployed. And how can you benefit? How should you do it? So it's a very simple process in the end. You just go over to the website of the Smart Cities Marketplace and apply for a very comprehensive call for applications. You have the link here on this presentation, and I believe that the link will also be shared in the comment section. So submit your application, and as soon as you submit it, we will assess your needs and provide you with the most adequate service. So who can apply? Well, cities and city consortium from EU member states and participating countries in Horizon Europe programs. As I said, we focus on small and mid-sized cities, but obviously larger cities are also welcome. Also businesses and small and mid-sized enterprises and project developers. You are encouraged to contact relevant city administrations, as we can only accept applications that have the commitment letter of a fellow city. And of course, investors, if you want to have opportunities to invest in projects in urban mobility, energy, or ICT. So just before we wrap up this introduction, just two practical examples of the Smart Cities Marketplace support services. So at this moment, we are supporting two cities, one in Bydgoszcz in Poland, another one in El Escorial near Madrid. So the Polish city is receiving knowledge on hydrogen generation and financial expertise. They are implementing a very ambitious project of creating 10 solar PV farms in order to generate green hydrogen and pilot a fleet of hydrogen buses. So this project has received investment before from the UCF and the CCAP, and we're now supporting them with knowledge and financial expertise, as I said. And then parallelly, can never say this word. We are supporting also El Escorial near Madrid in collaboration with Don Chicleto, with financial expertise and funding pathways to implement their decentralized parking stations for e-bikes and scooters. So without further ado, let's crack on to the first presentation of the day. I will stop sharing my presentation and we'll move over to Stefano Borgato that will showcase the costs and benefits of the sustainable urban transition following different simulations of different urban mobility measures applied to different contexts. So in this presentation, we will discover the costs, the benefits, and the impacts of selected urban transition measures through Stefano Borgato. Stefano Borgato holds a master's degrees in environmental and land planning engineering from the Polytechnic University of Milan, and also a master's degree in urban studies from the Simon Fraser University of Vancouver in Canada. He has more than 8 years of experience in transport planning, research, and sustainability-related projects, being currently a transport planner and a policy analyst for TRT, Transporti e Territorio. Stefano, the stage is yours. Thank you. I'm looking forward to hear your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Rafael. I think you said it all about myself, so I don't need to introduce myself further. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here and present this study that we did for EIT Urban Mobility in 2021. So the idea, and of course, thank you for your attention. So this study was focused on identifying the costs and benefits of the sustainable urban mobility transition by producing a quantified analysis in European cities by 2030 and by 2050. So the analysis focused on both the overall context of the European context, and also we simulated 10 different city prototypes to take into account of differences between cities' size and cities' geographies. So overall, the key questions that with our study we want to address were: how much will the transition to sustainable urban mobility cost? Which benefits and what type of changes in the mobility ecosystem will this transition bring? And also, what will be the most effective policies that can accelerate this transition? So just to provide with an overview, a brief context of the study. So it has to be mentioned that managing mobility issues is one of the most complex challenges that city governments has to face. And of course, it requires a lot of resources, it requires a lot of technical knowledge, and poor planning can result in very negative consequences on the urban mobility and the overall environment of the city, with the very well-renowned problems as congestion, air pollution, noise, emission of CO2, of course, accidents, and urban sprawl. And speaking of CO2 emissions, so one of the main goals of this study was to try to understand how much indeed would it cost to get to the Green Deal targets. So the Green Deal targets are extremely ambitious, and they aim for a minus 55 greenhouse gas emission by 2030 and minus 90% reduction by 2050. However, it has to be mentioned that between 1990, those values, those reduction actually are compared to 1990 values. However, between 1990 and 2019, transport sector emissions in Europe have increased by another 24%, and specifically cities are responsible for more than 70% of greenhouse gas emission, with urban transport specifically, which is estimated to constitute between 20 and 50% of the total urban energy consumption. So there is a need for an integrated strategy that is able to apply sustainable mobility policies that could also be evaluated in a scientific and measurable way. So to address this issue, we realized this study by applying the MOMOS assessment tool, which is a modeling tool that has been developed by TRT Trasporti Territorio, my company. Is a strategic and aggregated model that can allow an evaluation of alternative solution, estimating resources needed and expected impacts of cities with different sustainable mobility policies applied. So in particular for this study, we applied three potential scenarios. We will see the details in a matter of minutes, to 12 different city prototypes to take into account differences among cities in both their dimensions. So we consider small, medium, and large cities, as well as differences in the geographic area. So we divided prototypes based on their localization in Northern, Central, Western, Southern, or Eastern Europe. And the main output and results of the model have been generalized at both the EU 27 level, considering the overall number of cities and their population that are part of each of the 12 prototypes. So just a few more words about the MOMOS model. MOMOS is, as I said, is a strategic and aggregated model. It does not replace more sophisticated models, but allows for an evaluation of alternative solution that is strategic, quantitative, theoretically sound, and can be adapted to a specific context. This is very important, but also very important, it can also be run with somewhat limited resources and within a short time frame. It is fully developed in Excel environment and mainly consists of 4 sections, including the adaptation of the model to the specific characteristics of the study area, the selection of exogenous factors and trends for the simulation of the reference and the policy scenario, the definition of intervention policies and strategy for the selection of specific sustainable mobility measures, and quantitative results, the production, the elaboration of quantitative results where the impact of the intervention strategy are also compared with the reference scenario or with a base year situation. So here you can see a nice overview of all the domain that the MOMOS model can simulate, and the results, as I will explain in details later, are related to those 3 main sectors, which are transport, the environment, and as well the economy. So as I said, the idea was to produce an overview of the overall EU 27 context, but at the same time to generalize the EU 27 context, we needed to define city prototypes where to apply the transition scenarios and the simulation of measures. So 12 prototypes have been designed, and we consider this type of dimensions category. So small cities between 50 and 100,000 inhabitants, medium up to 500, and large with more than 500,000 inhabitants, and the geographic areas with the associated countries per each geographic area. So in total, more than 400, I think 447, 779 European cities. So all the European cities with more than 50,000 inhabitants have been considered in this study and grouped into one of those 12 prototypes intersecting the dimension and the geographic area. So the input data. So the model requires a lot of input data. Those input data are fundamental to account for the differences in each specific context and to represent the base year urban condition on the basis of the specific context. So we collected data related to the territorial characteristics, so the city type, population structure, economy, urban growth, income. We collected data about the urban mobility characteristics, of course, including the modal split at the base year, congestion, traffic flows, share of logistic vehicles, logistic flow, public transport characteristics, park and ride, infrastructure and traffic management, so paid parking, public transport reserved lanes, electric charging points, share mobility information, vehicle access information, as well as traffic calming. So this is just an overview. I'm not going to go into the details of all the input data because there is a huge list, but as I will say later, all the details can be found in the full study that is public and published in the EIT Urban Mobility website. So the data collection was related to all these. Sorry, my slides are not moving anymore. Yeah, now they are. So the input data the input data collection considered all those variables, and these were the sustainable policy measures that were simulated. So these policy measures are grouped into 6 different groups. So we have a shared mobility group and demand management, including the mobility as a service, bike sharing, car sharing, micromobility, delivery and servicing plan, working from home, innovative service focusing on autonomous vehicles, demand responsive transport, ITS. Then we have a group focusing on green public transport, logistic fleet, charging infrastructure like electric and hydrogen and electric refueling infrastructure, green public fleet, green freight fleet, pricing schemes, including congestion and pollution charging, parking pricing, public transport fare, transport infrastructure, so cycling networks, bus network, tram, metro, multimodal mobility hubs or park and ride, urban delivery center, and finally traffic management and control measures like access regulations, so low traffic zone, low emission zone, the prioritization of public transport, traffic calming measures, so the 30 kilometer per hour speed limit, and also pedestrian areas. So these policies have been selected considering the most relevant European initiatives aimed at addressing urban mobility and the sustainability of urban mobility, and they provide a full picture of the elements that are available to policymakers and to municipalities to actually implement sustainable policies to move forward and to drive a sustainable mobility transition. So all these policies have been grouped in 3 different scenarios. So these are 3 potential scenarios that have been applied. Each scenario includes a specific set of transport policy measures that comprehensively cover all the range of options that I said are available to cities. So in each scenario, each policy has been implemented and modulated according to different implementation patterns, and each scenario has a different focus. So scenario 1 is called Promote and Regulate, is mostly based on inducing a more sustainable mobility behavior of citizens through information, regulations, and promotion of innovative and shared mobility services. Also, the approach of this scenario is mostly aimed to the short and medium term. We have scenario 2, on the other hand, which is called Plan and Build, more focused on in technology and infrastructure. So the aim here is to change the urban environment and its transport activity with a more long-term strategy. And the focus is especially on public transport with less emphasis on soft alternatives. Also, shared autonomous vehicle and demand-responsive transport are a crucial part of this scenario. And finally, scenario 3 consider policies from the previous two scenarios, but it's important to specify it intensifies their reach. So intensifies the targets of the policies that have been applied to scenario 1 and scenario 2. Indeed, this was necessary because to get and to reach the Green Deal objectives, especially in 2030, which is right around the corner, and those objectives are very ambitious, we require a very substantial shift in behavioral and in the technology that is available, so that only through intensified policy, this shift and these ambitious objectives of CO2 emission reduction can be attained. So this is an overview of, I'm not going to focus too much on this slide, but it basically shows all the policies that have been associated to each of the three scenarios that I just explained. And also there are a series of exogenous assumptions that have not been included in the policy measures, but they are part of the simulation. Indeed, the scenarios are built on the ambitious penetration of the innovative vehicle technology that is inspired to the EU Fit for 55 mix. And also it needs to be expressed that the study only considered the costs that we will see later affecting local authorities to support the evolution of vehicle technology, whereas other relevant costs that are external to the study, for example, government incentives, automotive sector, and so on, as affiliated to external entities, are not considered within this study. So this is also to mention the exogenous assumption in terms of vehicle stock that our scenarios are built on. So they are built on the Fit for 55 inspired to the Fit for 55 strategy. So we can see on the left, for example, the sharing cars and light commercial vehicles in 2030 is supposed to get to 13% for full battery electric and 5% for plug-in hybrid, whereas this share is expected to grow a lot more by 2050. And the graph on the right shows the shares for buses, coaches, and heavy truck stock. So to move on to the results, so the main part of the most interesting part of the study, we calculated key indicators for each of the 12 city prototypes, and considering, as I said, the number of cities within each prototype, we also provided a simulation of the results for the entire EU27 context. So the results I will show here are the results for the EU27 context, whereas in the full study that is public on the EIT Urban Mobility website, you can find all the specific and individual results for every single city prototypes. So more specifically, we also consider several output indicators, but I will be focusing on these key indicators, including car ownership and modal split, emission of CO2, fatalities, and the city total revenues, total costs, external cost savings, and city net balance for the economic part. So let's start with the CO2 emission reduction. We can see the column on the left is the level in 2019, and then the two groups of columns are the results of the scenarios. So S01, the yellow column, S02, scenario 2, the red, and scenario 3, the mix combining policies from the first two scenarios, is the orange one. So the Green Deal targets, so as I mentioned before, minus 55 greenhouse gas emission by 2030 and minus 90% by 2050. So this target is met by all scenarios in 2050, as we can see. Indeed, the Green Deal target column is higher than the columns of the scenario in 2050, whereas by 2030, only scenario 3 slightly achieves only by 1% the target of the Green Deal. This is because, of course, the short-term objective in 2030 is only possible through intensified policy measure, and as I said, through basically a drastic and very huge change in shift of people behavior, accompanied with like a very quick uptake of new technologies that are available. So without policies, is also necessary to mention that the CO2 reduction would only be minus 25% by 2030 and only minus 65% in 2050. Of course, without policy, the do nothing scenario basically refers to the evolution, to the technology evolution, technology innovation that brings along a fleet renewal. So basically all the electrification of the fleet that is foreseen, as I mentioned before, by the Fit for 55 strategy, by the 50 for 55 forecast. So also fatalities, we simulate the number of urban fatalities, and of course the Green Deal addresses for zero emission urban fatalities by 2050. Of course, this is a very ambitious target, and the simulation of our scenarios resulted in, by 2050, a reduction of between minus 48% in scenario 1 and minus 63% in scenario 3. So in scenario 2, the trend was mainly driven by the construction of active mobility infrastructure. As I said, scenario 2 is the one focused on building hard infrastructure in the city. So building more pedestrian areas, building more cycling path, cycling and network facilities. So those elements, of course, increase the safety of people, especially the safety of people walking and biking in our cities. Whereas in scenario 1 and scenario 3, the main drivers of the reduction in urban fatalities are mainly the traffic calming measures. So basically implementing a 30 kilometer per hour traffic speed limit on the city has a huge impact in the decrease of urban fatalities. And also, just to mention that several cities prototypes reach less than one fatalities every 100,000 inhabitants, and the best results looking at the city prototypes were found in small cities. Also, because of course in small cities the traffic is of course less than large cities, so there is that type of advantage. So we can look now at the model split results. So the model split results for the three scenario, each one in a different chart. So we represented the model split by considering private motorized, so cars and motorbikes, public transport, so considering metro, buses, trams, active modes, so considering walking and biking, and also we simulated the car sharing, but also the car sharing includes in 2050 the autonomous car sharing, because the autonomous vehicles were foreseen to be first part of the car sharing services. So looking at the private motorized, we can see that private motorized decrease in all three scenarios by 2030 by minus 11, 12% in scenario 1 and 2, and by, of course, scenario 4, but scenario 3 is supposed to be minus 24% in 2050. Of course, that reduction is huge in order to get to the Green Deal target. We can see that in both scenario 1 and scenario 3, car sharing increases at the expense of private vehicles, and active modes grow by 6% in scenario 1 and by 9% in scenario 3, whereas basically this increase is mostly seen until 2030, whereas between 2030 and 2050, the share of active modes remain quite constant. And on the other hand, scenario 2 has a strong growth of public transport, especially in the long term, where we can see an increase of 18% in the public transport uptake, as we can see, moving from 21% in 2019 to up to 39% in 2050. Our ownership, of course, modal split is also should also be accompanied by car ownership. We can see that car ownership in scenario 3 decreases by 30% in 2030 and by minus 44% in 2050. But again, these are huge reductions that are only attained in scenario 3, which is again the only scenario that is capable of meeting the Green Deal target already by 2030. In scenario 2, we can see a more substantial reduction by 2050 when the effects of the transport infrastructure kicks in, whereas in scenario 1, the reduction is, let's say, only 16% by 2050. And looking at the city prototypes again, the highest drops is in car own is shown in a large city where it can be explained by the widest range of alternatives that are offered to car. Indeed, to be able to drop your car, you need to be able to rely on a wide set of reliable and feasible alternatives that is mostly available only in large cities. So results of the study for the economic part, we can see we simulated the cost. So the cost is the top right chart. So we simulated a city total cost. Those costs are discounted and cumulated from 2019 up to 2030 and up to 2050. We also consider the city total revenues. So revenues coming, for example, from paid parking, from innovative service subscriptions, from, of course, public transport ticketings. Very important, we also simulated the external cost savings. So these are the external cost savings coming from reduction in externalities associated with CO2 emission, associated with other pollutant emission reduction, associated with noise reduction, and associated with less fatalities. And overall, the chart on the bottom left, the net balance shows basically what is the overall results. So scenario 1 and scenario 3 have positive net balance for all prototypes, whereas the benefits of scenario 3 especially kick in the longer term with 98 billion accumulated and discounted by 2050. Scenario 2 is the one with the highest cost associated, as we can see from the top right chart, also because the need of building transport infrastructure and the reduction of externalities that has to be mentioned that mainly comes from CO2 emission reduction. So the CO2 emission reduction component accounts between 31% and 64% of the external cost savings. And on average, scenarios will bring between 40 and 130 euro per capita per year of net benefits until 2050. So finally, the last chart that I will show are the policy effectiveness. So the effectiveness of the groups of policies considering different typology of cities. So basically, we can see in this chart on the x axis, we can see the net balance. So on the right, we have the groups of policies that are the most profitable, where on the left side there are the groups of policies that are most expensive, and on the y-axis we can see the reduction of greenhouse gas emission. So, for example, looking specifically at small cities, we can see that the shared mobility and demand management is the one that attained the highest CO2 reduction, whereas, for example, pricing scheme is the one with a lower reduction of CO2, but at the same time is the group bringing the most profits. Looking, for example, large cities, we can see that the transport infrastructure is the most expensive and bringing not very high CO2 reduction, whereas shared mobility and demand management are the one with the highest reduction in large cities as well. And also we can see this chart for 2050 projections. Basically, for small cities, it is pretty much unchanged. For medium cities, in this sense, we can see that shared mobility is also the one with the highest CO2 reduction associated with. And overall, all the policies are quite close to a neutral or positive net balance. So this is also like an interactive tool. As I mentioned, the results are available for the overall EU27 context that I just showed now, and also for the single city prototypes. So I would invite you to look in the EIT Urban Mobility website. I will also provide the link later to navigate on this interactive tool where it's possible to choose the different geographic area, the different city dimension, the different scenario, and see interactively how the results change based on the specific city prototype. A few limitations of the study. Of course, the analysis was at a high level character, and the simulation didn't pretend to present the most likely outcome, but rather show some potential pathways towards a zero emission future in a context, of course, of large uncertainties of policies, of trend, and so on. Also, a comprehensive and specific data collection is mandatory for a good simulation. Certain data had to be estimated, and a good cooperation with cities is fundamental. And also, MOMOS is a strategic model working at aggregate level and simulating policy packages, so not replacing more detailed and sophisticated transport model. And also, as I said, for example, the cost effectiveness is associated to groups of policies and not to the single specific policy, also because policy have a huge interaction across each other. So this was the policy effectiveness was provided at group level. And of course, within the same group, there might be policies that are, of course, more effective than other as part of the same group. So this is a few conclusions, because I think also my time is basically over. So the implementation of sustainable policy measure is set to have a great impact on the modal split, as well to reduce car ownership and road fatalities. In terms of economic results, scenarios have positive net balance, whereas the benefit of the scenario focused on the transport infrastructure can kick in the longer term. And the policy effective analysis allowed us to basically compare the CO2 reduction with also the costs and revenues associated to each policy group. The study was capable of assessing potential scenarios of the sustainable mobility transition, and complying with the 2030 target requires an immediate and substantial adoption of significant behavioral change. So, for example, the modal shift change has to be basically drastic to get to the 2030 objective. And it's only possible through very high intensity policy. Whereas in the longer term, all three scenarios simulated achieve the 2050 target, also thanks to a larger penetration of alternative vehicles. But still, the implementation of sustainable policy measure is necessary to reach the Green Deal target. And I want to mention this to conclude. An additional layer of accuracy can be gained by applying the model to a single city. So our model is also capable of being applied to a single specific city context, but of course, in that sense, like a detailed input data collection in collaboration with the city, as well as discussion to basically tailor define the specific policy targets according to the specific vision of each city is fundamental. So again, this is the link to download the full study, which is available on the EIT Urban Mobility website, as well as the Tableau, the link to the Tableau where you can interactively navigate the results. And thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Stefano, for your very comprehensive presentation. If there are any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. In the meantime, I'll just ask you a quick question, Stefano, and then we have to move over. So imagine that you are a mid-sized city and you're now planning your new sustainable urban mobility plan. So giving the knowledge retrieved from this study, where should you put your priorities at? So if you have to do a short roundup of possibilities, if you want something that's impactful,
Yeah.
what should you
Yeah,
focus on?
I think there are two different like consideration to be made. One is we need to act soon, like right now, because the 2030 is right around the corner,
Around the
and
corner?
we need to take into account basically what cities are capable of in terms of resources, and also how citizens might react to the implementation of policies that can drastically change their daily behavior. For example, a zero emission zone might be the best. Of course, is the best solution to reduce CO2 emission within urban area, because we basically forbid everyone with a polluting car, with a nice combustion engine car, to drive within the area. And also, it doesn't require huge resources from the municipality compared, for example, to building new metro lines. But how will citizens react to like a zero emission zone, or even a strict low emission zone that is implemented within a city? So I think we simulated policy packages, we defined targets to each single policies, but I think it might be useful to have a discussion with each single city context to understand, in this context, these type of measures might work better, might have a better impact, and might also be more accepted by the citizen, which is at the end of the day one of the key elements.
Hmm. Okay, okay, got it. I think it was very, very clear and also very, very useful for you to present this study. So thank you very much, Stefano. Before we conclude your presentation, so I understand that, of course, the public engagement is important, and the citizens must be involved in these decisions. The study, from my understanding, but of course you're here to answer my questions, does not account for public engagement.
Uh,
It
in
is.
in this no in this one
Hmm.
we defined the policies
Hmm.
alongside our client, which was indeed
Hmm.
EIT Urban Mobility. We this So this study, was the objective was to produce a simulation for the overall EU27 context, and through the simulation of city prototypes.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
in this case, of course, as I said, the engagement might be different from each one prototype to another. So that component was not included in this study.
Hmm.
But as I said, the possibility of the MOMOS model is to apply the model to a single specific context. So, for example, if a city that is attending right now is willing to know more about this model and would like to have a simulation for its specific city, that's totally possible. And I think in that case, the public engagement and an in-depth discussion with the stakeholders to understand which type of policies we should put in the model, we should put in the scenarios, how much we should intensify each policy. That will be a key element for like a proper simulation. And again, these results do not offer like the most likely outcome of the transition towards zero emission mobility, whereas potential like pathways, potential scenarios with a
Hmm.
predetermined combination of policy
Okay.
measures. And also, this policy measure, of course, can also be adapted to the specific context, because some policies might not work in some type of cities. For example, in small cities, it doesn't make any sense to suggest the implementation of a new metro line. It's too
Yeah.
expensive. No one will be able to do that. Whereas maybe a
Hmm.
good car sharing system, or a good demand responsive transport, especially like in the peripheral areas of the city, might be the best solution for a small context. So yeah, I think public engagement of stakeholder in case we would like to apply the simulation to a specific city is fundamental.
Okay. Okay, so it's possible to include that in the Momus model. Okay, that's clear. Thank you very much, Stefano, once again for your presentation. Very useful, very clear. Time now for the city of Vila de Cans. So Vila de Cans is a 65,000 inhabitant city in Catalonia near Barcelona that aims to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. And in order to achieve that, Anabel Camacho will present some of the ongoing activities such as deployment of low emission zones, the creation of cycling networks and infrastructure, and the delivery of a new sustainable urban mobility plan. And in order to present this, we have Anabel Camacho. So Anabel is an architect from the Polytechnic University of Catalonia, with a master's degree from the University of Jaén focused in accessibility. She has worked for more than 15 years for the public administration on urban development issues in city projects focused on the improvement of public space. She's currently the director of the public space area for the Vila de Cans City Council. So thank you very much, Annabelle, for being here. The stage is yours. Please share what is Vila de Cans doing to achieve carbon neutrality. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. First of all, I want to thank you the opportunity you have given us to explain and to share our projects and our experience in Vila de Cans, a medium-sized city. And the second one, I want to apologize because maybe my pronunciation is not so good, but I'm going to try to do the best. Vila de Cans, as Stefano has said, is a medium-sized city with 67,000 inhabitants and an area of 20.4 square kilometers. It's located in the metropolitan area of Barcelona, just 18 kilometers from there. To contextualize, I'm going to explain you the city strategic framework. Vila de Cans 2030, because was born as a living strategic planning instrument that embodies a vision of the present and future of Vila de Cans, and that ensures its validity and usefulness because it evolves and learns from the experience of deploying what is written in its three components: Vila de Cans 2030 strategy, the urban agenda, and the sectoral plans. The first component of the city strategic framework is Vila de Cans 2030 strategy, which defines 9 strategic city axes, 6 thematic axes, and 3 strategic transversal axes. One of them specifically focuses on this great challenge, the ecological transition. However, the climate change challenge is also addressed through the different axes. In addition, the Vila de Cans 2030 also defines 25 city challenges. 11 of them are directly address the challenge of the climate emergency. The 2030 strategy defines 2 city missions. One in the field of education with the objective of having 0 school dropouts, and the other relates to today's topic. It's to become climate neutral in 2030. The missions are major city objectives which respond to challenges identified by the strategy itself that require the involvement and commitment of local agents, the quadruple helix, as they require a systemic transformation. The second component is the urban local agenda of Vila de Cans. It's an integrated urban development planning tool and represents a new vision of city planning. It starts from a holistic diagnosis of the city's urban reality that brings together the population, territory, economy, climate change, energy, mobility, and housing. The city was chosen in 2019 as one of the pilot cities by the Ministry of Transport, Mobility and Urban Agenda. So Viladecans' agenda replicates the methodology and structure of the Spanish urban agenda. It contains 10 strategic objectives, 30 specific, and 131 actions. Viladecans' urban agenda also addresses this great challenge more specifically, with the strategic objective 3 to prevent and reduce the impacts of climate change and improve resilience, and the number 5, which promotes proximity and sustainable mobility. It's made up of 131 actions, and many of which are aimed at promoting sustainable mobility, and therefore reducing the impacts of climate change. Specifically, about 80 actions contribute to these city missions, such the creation of more cyclone streets, the extension of the municipal cycling network, the creation of new green areas for residents, etc. We'll see. So we are currently working and learning how to work with missions. Here you can see our mission of the ecological transition. The mission is making Viladecans an emissions neutral city in 2030 and negative emissions in 2050, optimizing the cycle of energy and increasing the presence of nature in the urban center. As you can see, it's a very ambitious target, and we have many work to do. In this summary, we can see that we have... Sorry, one moment. We can see that we have a great challenge, climate change, and how we align all the actions we are working on the Sustainable Development Goals. And with our strategic axes that we have just explained, the 2030 strategy, the city challenges, and the local urban agenda. We follow Mariana Mazzucato quadruple helix diagrams methodology to work on the missions. Viladecans has a large network of local and proximity agents belonging to different sectors and areas of activity, which complete the representation of the quadruple helix, such as industry, mobility, and transport. Our innovative element is that we enrich the Mazzucato's diagram by incorporating the concept of levers. Instead of having 5 projects, we have developed 5 levels of the missions, and we define them as the 5 fundamental elements that will contribute to the development of the challenge posed by the missions. The allied organizations that are linked to the mission may choose, when defining and promoting the projects, their contribution to the levers based on their capacity for involvement. They can take part in all of them simultaneously, in one of them, or in several of them as appropriate. The 5 levels you can see on the wall is clean energy, production and consumption, efficiency, circular economy, electrification of consumption, and CO2 storage. And the other circles, you can see the projects that are in relationships with every level. Allied organizations are the key agents for achieving the mission. They represent one of the parts of the quadruple helix: public, private, academic, or civil society spheres. They must actively contribute to the local ecosystem to advance the achievement of carbon neutrality in 2030. In addition, the allied organization will foster within its organization and with the rest of the participation organizations a collaborative attitude based on generosity and emotional and professional growth. Now, I would like to focus on some of the current initiatives we are working to decarbonization of mobility and therefore contribute to achieve our mission. Mobility is a key sector in order to achieve the carbon neutrality as it's the main resource of CO2 emission in the city. We are going to talk about the low emission zone, the cycling network, and the sustainable urban mobility plan. The first is a project to deploy the low emission zone in the city. In July 2021, a national law on climate change and energy transition was approved, which said that cities with more than 50,000 inhabitants had to implement a low emission zone. Here we can see the timeline. We have planning, and the second quarter of 2024, we have to start up the low emission zone. The purpose is to contribute to improvement of air quality and mitigate the effects of climate change, resulting in an improvement in citizen health and the quality of urban life, promotion a more sustainable and inclusive mobility with a lower impact on the acoustic quality, recovering public space and promoting the improvement of road safety and traffic pacification. For us, the implementation of the LED represents an opportunity to begin a process of urban transformation, as well as to implement other emission reduction measures with complementary actions. At Viladecans, we have decided to include the entire urban area within the low emission zone, excluding only the industrial areas and living space roads, so that those vehicles that don't meet the conditions can live. Here we can see in this image the complete zone of the city. Okay. Here you can see a small summary of what our low emission zone will be. You can see how it covers the entire urban area and the list of the different action plans and financed by the Next Gen funds. Access control cameras, air quality sensors and sound, signage, communication campaign, and control vehicles. The different access control cameras, which represent a total cost of 230,000 euros, are located at the different access points to Viladecans from the neighboring municipalities. There are accesses that are not controlled by a camera, but control will be reinforced with moving vehicles. Like this one. One of the main objectives of the implementation of the low emission zones is to contribute to the improvement of the air quality and the mitigation of the climate change. In order to have data when we have a pollution episode, and therefore the low emission zone must be activated, as well as to obtain indicators on the benefits of the implementation of the low emission zone. Different sensors will be placed throughout the municipality, both to analyze the quality of the air as well as sound limits. The measures are also addressed to promote a model toward the use of more sustainable transport, among others. The low emission zone must be correctly signaled so that drivers know at all times that they are entering a restricted area. This involves placing horizontal and vertical signage. The vertical signs are unified and are the same for the entire metropolitan area of Barcelona. This facilitates the identification of the low emission zone in all the municipalities around Barcelona. Before launching the low emission zone, citizens must be adequately communicated. Therefore, a communication company has been hired to help us with the communication campaign. This will involve informing on social networks, on municipal information panels, and in the municipal magazine. Viladecans' strategy to develop and improve the local cycling network has been based in three key aspects. A network that is safe, connected, and segregated from other modes of transport. The cycling network should guarantee mobility on working days, and therefore it's key to ensure main vertical and horizontal axes within the municipality that guarantee not only internal trips, but also internal and external. A secondary cycling network should be developed which allowed users to reach safely until their final destination. In the last 10 years, Viladecans' cycling network has turned from a disconnected network, mainly focused on leisure and weekend mobility, not segregated, to a new network that fulfills the three principles above. In 2020 and 2022, the whole network of shared roads of the municipality was developed. More than 42 kilometers of cyclable ways in streets where no bike lanes existed in order to ensure capillary mobility that allow reaching users' final destination once they leave the main axis with a clear horizontal and vertical signage and a clear rules gathered at the local circulation regulation approved in 2019. This image shows the current cycling network in the city, both segregated bike lanes, the main roads in blue, and shared bike lanes, secondary roads in yellow. Now we are currently carrying out several projects focused on improving the municipality cycling network. On the one hand, using next generation subsidies, and on the other hand, promoting new projects from the city council or together with other local administrations. We have a specific project financed by NextGen exclusively focused on the use of sustainable mobility by bicycle. Two of the actions consist of updating and improving the bike lanes on two main axes that run through the city from north to south, linking different main roads. Two main avenues that used to rain-fed wet course, the one that borders the Gavà, that is the one you can see on the image, the neighboring municipality, share a bike lane on either side of the road. The other avenue, Torrente Ballester, is located in the center of municipality. The objective is to improve the connection of the different sections of bike lane, currently without connection and intersections or at specific points. Another objective we have been working on is the connection among Viladecans with neighboring municipalities. For this purpose, a new bike lane has been built that along the main road and connects Gavà and Sant Boi. For the northern part of the municipality, a project to connect with the municipality of Sant Climent has been drafted together with the Barcelona Provincial Council and is pending execution. The objective of these new bike lanes is to encourage the use of more sustainable transport, and to this end, a new shared bicycle services has also been implemented that allows citizens to travel comfortably. This is a shared bike service provided in collaboration with Barcelona metropolitan area, implemented in 15 municipalities of the metropolitan area. The bicycles are 10% electric and high range, allow trips between 50 municipalities in the metropolitan area of Barcelona, and ensure intermodality with public transport. Viladecans is the municipality with a higher use and bike rentals. 13 stations and 236 bikes planned to be increased. Viladecans cycling network covers most of the territory, allowing all districts to have some time of cycling offer. However, there are numerous points where the network can be improved, both sections without a network and other points without an adequate connection. The purpose of this section is to carry out the necessary signaling work to finish the connection and organization of the current cycling network to achieve a structured and homogeneous network. Vertical and horizontal signage will be implemented and some pedestrian crossings will be adapted. We are working too in a deployment of parking for bicycles and electric scooters. We have planning to put different smart and safe parking options for bicycles and for electric scooters based on different models on the market to improve the network with this service. We have two typologies. One are closed parking that we have planned to put in a singular places. And the other one, the typology 2, is parking with outdoor racks, and we are planning to put near the public buildings. The area metropolitana of Barcelona has a metropolitan service for safe private bicycles parking called BiciBox. It works with registration and access control. And there is a continuously growing demand for this service. It's a scalable model and allows the provision of more places if the demand increases in the future. It's planned to expand the offer at the train station by implementing a new high-capacity car park, a sustainable modular system with recyclable materials, which can be completely disassembled and reused in other locations. Its total area will be 62 square meter, with a module structure of 5 per 2 modules and a capacity for 38 bicycles. Currently, Viladecans has to update its sustainable urban mobility plan. In order to do that, we have just joined a new project in the framework of the URBAC program, which aims at sustainable urban mobility. The project is led by the city of Liepaja in Latvia. The objective of doing it through its European program is to exchange knowledge and experiences between the different European cities that are part of the consortium. This makes it especially interesting for us as it will allow us to work with relevant local agents and expert support on projects of these characteristics. The coordinating city, Liepaja, is one of the cities that are part of the 100 European cities that take part of the climate neutral mission by 2030, which is totally aligned with our city mission. The proposal focuses on creating a long-term vision to develop urban transport, whether walking, cycling, or public transport, and to improve the sustainable mobility of small and medium-sized cities. Therefore, it will entail a joint work during the next 2 years. And we are also happy to share with you that we have just recently been awarded the Green Leaf 2025. This is an opportunity to finish consolidating the credibility and coherence in the story of the city that we have all built. and which must take us to 2030 being a medium-sized city with CO2 neutrality, with a profound social and urban transformation that looks to 2040 and 2050 to be negative in emissions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Annabelle, for your presentation. I think it was very clear to understand your targets, your priorities in urban mobility in Vila de Canes. Quite interesting that you're doing so much in terms of cycling infrastructure. So, and I have a small question. I have a small question regarding that. So we know that the delivery and the deployment of cycling infrastructure through bike lanes, it's always a tricky topic to manage. Usually citizens are quite reluctant to have space for cars getting getting reduced. So how do you manage this public engagement component? How do you manage to implement these changes in urban space, fostering space for cycling and hence reducing space for cars, while not having a negative backlash on the public? How do you create this?
One moment.
No worries.
Okay, it's not easy for us, but we trust in the project and we want to change the mobility of the city. And we are going to do many communication because we think that we must to recover the space for the citizen and for the people and not for the cars. We know that maybe it will be a problem, but we are doing many changes, and now we think that the space of the city it's for the bikes, for the los cargadores,
For the pedestrians, I
electric
imagine.
chargers, and for all the things we need to go until the neutrality of carbon.
Has it been a problem so far? This reduction of space for cars and delivering it to cyclists? Has it
Yes,
been?
yes, it's a problem. It's a problem now because now we are in the transition, and the bicycles and the cars are living together, and it's not easy because the pedestrians are walking between the bikes, and we are doing many work to resolve that.
So
But we
you're
have
betting.
sorry.
So you're betting a lot on communication and communication with citizens. That this is for their own good.
Yeah, I think that the key is the communication, and we have to do. I don't
You
know
can
how
say it
to.
in Spanish, and I can translate it.
No,
Don't worry.
sensibilizar
Yeah. To
a la gente.
exactly. That's a tough one to translate. Well, to
Sorry.
generate knowledge on this certain topic, I struggle with that one too. Don't worry. Okay, that was
But we
very
need to
clear.
talk a lot with the people and to explain the benefits of the changes, because if not, if the people and the citizens don't understand that, it's impossible to advance. It's impossible, and we have to communicate a lot.
Okay, that's I totally agree with that. Okay, Annabelle, thank you very much for your time and for your presentation.
Thanks to
We look
you.
forward to seeing you in other initiatives and other events of ours. Thank you very much, Annabelle. So
Thank
next
you.
in line, we speak about financing. So to speak about this such an interesting topic. We have Tommaso Busso from the Bankers Without Boundaries, a consortium partner of the Smart Cities Marketplace, who will present different available mechanisms to finance city projects, more specifically sustainable urban mobility plans. So Tommaso is a senior analyst at Bankers Without Boundaries, where he covers numerous projects of sustainable finance, ranging from sovereign green bond issuance, cities decarbonization modeling, structuring of financing facilities, all the way to support the deployment of reforestation financing. So he's been working over 3 years with companies and organizations across Asia, Europe, Africa, and America. So thank you very much, Tommaso, for being here. Please go ahead. We see you. We are not yet seeing your slides. Now we are. So please take it. The stage is yours. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Rafael. Thanks for this very kind introduction. So good morning, everybody. It's been very rich so far, so I don't want to overload you too much with additional information, but we'll try our best to be very synthetic and get to the point. Finance has been mentioned so far quite a few times already, but the objective for us is really providing new ideas, providing new instruments for cities, ideally something that has already been tested, but not necessarily. So that this is the mission of our organization of BWB, but also of the host of this event, which is Smart Cities Marketplace. And it's once again an opportunity to remind you of the services that we're offering in terms of technical assistance and also financial assistance in this overall project. So today I'm going to go through the key principles of smart urban mobility project finance. We'll start from there. We'll go then through the planning financial steps. The third point will be choosing the best financial source for it. We'll go through, sort of like a mental map that makes you decide how to get there. We'll then focus on key instruments, on just a few of them, like 3 or 4, which are the ones that we tend to prefer and recommend to cities, but not exclusively. We'll then move to this final overview of all the instruments that I will have shown to you this morning, and then we'll lead to a quick question time like we did with Rafael so far. Please share your questions live. Sabine and our colleagues will be sharing that with me after that. But by all means, I want this to be as interactive as possible. I don't see any of you, but if you are, let's say, reactive and provide questions, people are welcome to interrupt me so I can reply to them or reply to them at the end. So let's start from the key principles of smart urban mobility project finance. These are shared not just by us, but also by other European Commission sponsored initiative. And it's really pushing to integrate the public and private sector as much as possible, but also to think in the long term. So when we think about point 1, operating across institutions, we're thinking absolutely about the integration of environmental policy, transport planning, fiscal policy. So a joint approach to all of these issues that should not be done in silos, which tends to be the case in some organizations, but that we really discourage in its usage. Involving citizens and stakeholders from the very beginning. This is something that's easier probably with smaller cities where there's like closer communication between citizens and public powers, but this is something that has been tried also in large organizations and municipalities. So we absolutely by all means encourage that, because it's useful to then decide if there's financial instrument that has some impact objectives or similar. It's really important that that's assessed preliminarily with citizens and stakeholders. Assessing performance of revenues. So this is what I refer to when we talk about taxes, fees, and charges. If we think about the fact that we're going to set a tax on car use, in the long run, it can lead to effectively reducing the number of people using cars, and that fee will then not bring in as much revenue as he did at the beginning. So we should also, once we think about finance and collecting revenues for cities, we should plan ahead how much and over time this how much money, how much capital this measure will bring in. Set a long-term implementation plan. Infrastructure projects can have a very large and very massive upfront investment, so it's really important that we know in advance that we're getting into 30, 40, 50 years sometimes kind of projects. Integrating public transport, no need to explain that, but really the aim is optimizing as many solutions as possible rather than just going into one single standalone solution. And lastly, setting MRV procedures, so monitoring, reporting, and verification. So as many verifications and steps as possible. In terms of financial steps, you probably don't see this extremely well, but what I can tell you is that this is an image that was once again produced by urban mobility experts, and it really allows you to break down your sustainable urban mobility planning, starting from setting up working structures, then moving on to determining a planning framework, analyzing the mobility situation. So these are like quite generic objectives, but then they're broken down into, as you can see on the sides, they're broken down into further subsections. So for instance, if we're talking about analyzing the mobility situation, we will have to identify information sources, analyze problems and opportunities. These are just like best practices to allow you to start thinking about the mobility projects you want to move forward with, and then proceed to follow each step. So we're going from preparation and analysis to the strategy development, measure planning, and implementation and monitoring. Point 7 to 9, let's say, of this general project appraisal, project development, really concern finance, and specifically when we talk about preparing for adoption and financing. Once all of this has been prepared, finance comes in and can help support and make the project successful. But of course, it doesn't need to be the first element in consideration when developing a project. Is just once the project is already conceived, stakeholders have been engaged, mobility situation has been analyzed, only then we are ready to move forward with the financial considerations. Nothing too sophisticated here, but just as a reminder of the process that you'll be able to review eventually. We move then, after we have analyzed at which stage of the project selection, project development, we are putting finance, we then have to decide where to get this finance and financial source. And I'm talking about finance, not funding or financing, because let's say finance encompasses this larger umbrella of funding and financing. So before we move forward, let me clarify this language. There's several instances where funding and financing, I think, are really not interchangeable, in the sense that when we think about financing, it's using and living repayable capital. So we're talking about the capital that is provided by banks, large funds, lenders. This is capital that needs to be paid back. Funding is generally the capital provided by governments, by other public bodies, that generally, once again, doesn't have to be paid back and has to be performed and has to be deployed in accordance to a specific agreement. So we'll think about the Horizon projects. All of these are funding, and looking for a loan at a bank will be the financing portion. So once we think about the steps that lead us to decide what to use in terms of finance, we start by deciding whether we want to start by increasing public budget, so levying more money that through taxes to different levels of sources that will then help us sponsor a new project, or if we're reducing the direct cost of projects and services for public budget. In the first scenario, so increasing public budget, we are going into four main options. The first will be local revenues. So I'm going to go through them eventually, but just to start thinking about it, local revenues can be project-related income. So we are building a road, and then we're going to charge people to use that road. And this is simply project-related income, right? In cities, pricing measures for car use, in that scenario, like cities that did that, Milan, London, and similar, we're just talking about specific congestion fees, traffic-related fees that lead people to pay for that. So you're levying taxes for simple usage of a service in certain areas, like in center of cities and similar. Or lastly, development charges and value capture. So this can be related to the property taxes of some areas. And I'm going to explain that eventually. Then there's a second kind of increase of public budget set of funding. So it's a national funding. This can come in as simply a transfer from the national government to the local government, the cities and municipalities, and can be generally not repayable, but there's also repayable scenarios. There's the EU funding bilateral programs, and then external finance. So all of this section included both funding and financing sources. This last one, external finance, is in the financing category. So you're going on the market. Going on the market means that you're, in this case, issuing debt in relationship to a specific project you want to finance. If you can ring fence, so limit the usage of funds for a specific purpose, then you'll potentially also be able to issue a green bond that also tends to have slightly lower costs for issuers on average. But this is what cities can do, let's say, if they don't have access or they don't want to resort to all the previous solutions that I mentioned. If then we want to think about reducing the direct cost of projects or services for public budget, then at that stage, we will think about private sector involvement, which can be subdivided, once again, in either direct lending or PPP solutions. PPP, so public-private partnerships. I'm sure that everybody by now has heard of them. In this scenario, there can be different levels of public-private partnerships according to the level of involvement of the private sector into this kind of activities. But I will go through them really briefly in a second. So among all of these solutions, we selected a few. And we tried to break down and to get into a bit more of a detail in some of them. So we started by local revenues, and local revenue streams, they can be a very powerful tool for cities, right? Because they can be determined independently. So without the regional government, the national government, without going to markets. This is relatively of easy implementation as long as it's supported by public opinion and by public stakeholders and citizens. So let's say relatively easy to decide, maybe not as easy to implement. It needs to have some clear considerations to be done before deploying that. As we start for project-related income, I was telling you before, we're building a road and we're charging for the use of a road. We're building a tramway line and we're charging for the use of a tramway line. We know that in general, tickets or just payments for the use of a service cover just a small portion of public infrastructure because it's very costly and you don't want to charge your users huge amounts of money. But that's where the balance is set, like striking a good balance between making the service usable and making it sufficiently expensive so that people can pay back a portion of that upfront cost. Second point would be pricing measure of private vehicles, and as I said, this has been done in cities like London, Milan, etc. It depends what time of the day you're entering the city, and it really can help reducing congestions and levying some money. But as I said, in the long-term planning, it can also reduce the amount of capital that's collecting because it can lead to people changing habits, which is great. But then if you're planning on covering some costs using those fees in terms of city budget, then you have to plan for a decrease in that capital collection. Point three, employers' contribution. Some cases, such as in Nottingham, UK, there has been like a workplace parking levy. So employers are charged based on the number of parking spaces they provide to their employees, and that's a potential solution. You need also to get support by citizens on that, but that's not too hard. And lastly, value capture instruments. So in general, we're talking about a variety of instruments that try to capture at least part of the additional value from the key beneficiaries of the project, like property owners and land developers. And in this case, since it's the real end users that take advantage of it, it's more acceptable to be deployed. As part of value capture instruments, we can consider 4 sub value capture instruments. Main one can be the mobility taxes. So the tax levied on the value of the real estate and calculate on the cadastral value. And so based on where the development and the creation of the real estate is done, they can be levied and then reinvested in the mobility. And you have voluntary capture based on an agreement between developer and local authority, and the developer property owner offer a voluntary contribution towards the cost of public infrastructure project, can gain some support for public authorities if done. And then we have the development charges and levies. So self-explanatory, said already. And lastly, tax increment financing. This is a tool that was first introduced in California not too long ago. And the mechanism is that the public sector borrows money to finance projects such as infrastructure development, and then the repayments are covered from ring fencing expected future additional tax revenues. So it's really about the public sector, anticipating some of that money for infrastructure development, which are then recovered eventually from a portion of the tax that's collected. For that mechanism and external financing, we're focusing on 3 main ones. That are the main ones that you maybe already have dealt with, or you would like to move forward with. We know that the audience of Smart Cities Marketplace is mostly small to middle-sized cities. So while loans can be closer to small middle-sized cities, kind of set of activities and projects, it's harder a bit to have put the capacity to deploy municipal and green bonds for cities, unless there is financial aggregation. So cities, small to middle-sized cities, coming together and together issuing a bond on the market. So this, to read more about this, you can go on our website and read about our solution booklets, where we really go through in the Finance for Aggregation solution booklet. We really go through what the main elements to aggregate among cities are and how to access potentially and deploy a green bond. Just once again, a reminder for everybody, while loans, in this case, we're seeing the EIB signing a loan with the Portuguese authority. And we see that the EIB has very specific objectives, so it has very favorable conditions, low interest rates. Generally, the repayment is the amount of it's really concessional, so a lower cost of capital. So the repayment tends to match the cost and the capital that has been collected. So you don't have to pay a lot in interest rates, but you have to achieve the objectives that the EIB is asking you to achieve. On the other hand, municipal bonds is once again when the cities go on the market and levy capital through that. It can be done for infrastructure services, infrastructure projects, and similar. And it's not limited to a specific kind of project. When instead you limit it to a specific kind of project that's for green mobility, sustainable mobility, or similar, you can aspire or potentially consider doing a green city bond or green municipal bond. The problem is that it tends to be more expensive. It needs a lot of structuring, power, etc. So it's really not not too easy to deploy, but if done, it can be cheaper in terms of interest rates to be given back to investors and offset for the higher issuance costs and structuring costs. Lastly, I want just to show you this ladder of public-private collaboration, which can really go from the lowest levels of collaboration when you have, for instance, the use of public sector actors in exclusively the design or building of a specific product, etc. And then it's where the public-private sector collaboration starts. You can have the private sector marginally contribute by leasing or providing delivery schemes, then building and operating and transfers, building, own and operate, design, building, finance, concessions. So all of these are increasing levels of involvement of the private sector that will lead potentially to privately owned or privately managed use of the service, but don't have to end there. They can exist in a range or in a spectrum, as people can sometimes say. So if the private sector is just involved in building, then it's not really involved. If it builds and operates it, of course it's getting more. Building, owning and operate, then it takes away the ownership from the public sector, and it can get all the way to indeed owning and managing it. And lastly, before I yield room for a couple of questions, we're showing you a recap roughly of all the existing solutions, but not necessarily all of them, but the main solutions that are existing at the EU level when we are thinking about the different layers of contributions: private sector, local sector, national, regional, or EU level kind of financing and funding. Top left, you see Elena, which is this technical assistance platform and solution by the EIB or the EIB loans, and it goes all the way down to PPP, voluntary capture, etc. You can cluster them based on whether they're the funds or the capital is being used for plan development and preparation, construction and procurement, service provision, or you can cluster it by who's providing it, right? So you'll see the legenda as well. The lighter boxes indicate financing instruments, whereas the bit of a darker ones are funding non-repayable instruments. All right, probably spoken too much, so if I'm happy to take any questions, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Tommaso, for your presentation. We'll open the floor for some questions, but in the meantime, I have a couple of questions. So for me, then small size cities, I imagine that the investment volume is often shorter than the ones for bigger cities, especially as light rail is not available for some of these small cities. So are loans still a viable option for smaller investment volumes, or should other possibilities be procured?
Right. So it depends. It depends on the kind of activity and project you're considering on doing. But generally, if you're thinking about an EIB loan, for instance, that has very favorable conditions, both in terms of interest rates and in terms of repayment schedule, you might think about at least 40, 50, 60 million in terms of amount, right? So this is not a lot. Like infrastructure projects, depending on how large they are, etc., they can get quite easily to that amount. But the EIB tends to support 50% of the total value of the project as a loan. So it wouldn't mean that it needs to be between 80 to 120 million. So it's a very large project at that point. So you either, as we said initially, you either get together with other cities and do a cross-city, cross-municipal, or even a regional project, right? Where there's several sponsors that collaborate and create a legal entity. And in that case, coming together, and I'm thinking especially for mobility, it doesn't tend to end at the border of the city, right? It tends to be much larger, it tends to connect cities. So in that case, it's more likely that you'll find a way to access that kind of loan. So it can either be coordinated by regions or by cities together. If not, there's more bottom up kind of activities. The PPP can sort of like be done by anybody. There's no really, as long as there's legal structures in place and they're sort of like effective, it doesn't have to be done by only big cities. And crowdfunding recently is becoming of more interest. If we're talking about mobility, I don't know a lot of projects that can be financed exclusively by crowdfunding, but small projects. I don't know, maybe the recharging stations for electric cars or something. Like each of them cannot be too expensive. So if you're a small city and you want to crowdfund that, maybe it's more accessible. So there's a lot of options that can be thought through. And once again, to help cities reach that.
Okay, just and one last question. So some mobility projects, especially mainly on the public space department, also on the cycling infrastructure, it's quite hard to achieve return on investment for these projects. I'm thinking of cycling infrastructures, of deployment of green areas in urban spaces. So for the investment, for the investor side, it's not often clear how can there be a return on investment. So I imagine one of the possible pathways, it's the congregation of different projects and finding an alternative revenue stream from different projects. I'm thinking, for example, of ticketing or pricing schemes for the access of parks. So on these kind of more difficult projects to find return on investment, is there any specific investment scheme that is tailored to these needs? Is there maybe grants is the best approach to this?
Yeah, if I can please ask our directors to please reshare the slide real quick and just show it in a second. This is a clear point that is being raised also by in other scenarios. So here, for a bike lane, for instance, you can't charge people to use a bike lane, and it's stupid to charge people to use a bike lane because then you're discouraging them from using it, right? So that's where value capture instruments or taxing private vehicles can really be used, right? Because if you manage to make the simple levy and taxes and redirect them towards projects that are not revenue generating, that is much more efficient. Development charges, there's you're building a new complex, a new house, and a portion of that, as a regulation or as a rule, needs to go towards important projects for the community, such as having at least a park area, at least bike lanes. So I would say that it comes from all of these mobility taxes, voluntary capture, development charges. All of these are much more effective in non-revenue generating activities. Otherwise, we're getting into weird stuff like having people pay for parks that or exclusively relying on philanthropies, like in the US, where people, if there's a nice philanthropist that is paying for a road, then you have a nice road. If the nearby road doesn't have a philanthropist, then you have a crappy road, right? So you want to try to ensure consistent services across cities and regions. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was very clear. Very clear. Thank you, Tommaso. I think that's it from your side. We have running out of time for this webinar, so let's move over to the next speaker. Thank you again, Tommaso. So next in line, we're reaching the end of this webinar. So we are bringing you now ready to market, ready to be implemented mobility solutions for you to get inspired, also to get to know what's the latest innovation in the mobility sector. So together with us, we are now calling Anes Enrico from Caros Mobility. So Caros Mobility is a carpooling solution that aims to decrease the number of daily commuting trips. Anes Enrico holds a master's degree in management from the ESSEC Business School, having extensive experience in strategy consultancy for governments and multinational companies. Anes has joined Caros Mobility to accelerate the company's international development following the investment of the European Innovation Council Fund, and she's now responsible for launching the company in new countries and making sure the new countries launched are a success. So, Anes, thank you very much for being here. The stage is yours. You have 7 minutes. Please take it away.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and good morning, everyone. So as Raphael told you, I'm in charge of international development at Caros Mobility. And in a few words, we provide a carpooling platform for daily commuting. The goal is to offer a sustainable mobility solution in rural and suburban areas. And our expertise relies on our ability to create carpooling networks that we integrate with local public transport. Basically, the app we provide is acting as a smart mobility assistant, offering tailored and optimized door-to-door itineraries, and rely also on artificial intelligence to match the best possible carpooling partners. What is really unique with our solution is that we integrate carpooling with local public transport via a triple integration. We provide intermodal trips. We integrate carpooling with ticketing and local pricing to align with the price of public transport. And we also integrate with Mass app to support multimodal solutions. And finally, our expertise has been strengthened over the last years, as the company has 10 years now, and we have developed a playbook in collaboration with cities and employers to build a large community of carpoolers mainly in Europe. And today, I would like to share with you an example of a project currently operating in Spain with the city of Vitoria-Gasteiz. So Vitoria-Gasteiz is a city located in the Basque country with 250,000 inhabitants. And the project was initiated as a result of the following observations. The public transport network, the existing public transport network, mainly covers the city center, and in the suburban area of Vitoria-Gasteiz, employees mainly commute by car because they have no other options. As the ambition of the city of Vitoria-Gasteiz is to reduce the carbon footprint of commuting trips in suburban and rural areas, together with EIT, we tested a pilot project. The project has been launched in June and is still running to build a carpooling network for employees working around the center of the city. With the support of EIT, we are implementing and adapting Caros Mobility playbook to build a carpooling network. And this playbook has already been tested and validated in other countries, but now we are adapting and testing this playbook to the Spanish market. And during this pilot, we focus our efforts on employees working in specific business areas, such as Yundiz or Alava Technological Park. The playbook I mentioned earlier relies on 4 pillars. First, we provide a dynamic carpooling solution powered with artificial intelligence and geolocation. Second, we are also providing a reporting SaaS platform to analyze data and monitor mobility habits where we build this network. Third, we provide human support to promote carpooling among employees and inhabitants, and I insist on local human support, and we have someone from my team located now in Vitoria-Gasteiz, Julien, whose job is to promote the service and to meet people and understand local mobility habits which can differ from one city to another. And finally, we involve local employers into the project as we need them to build a critical mass of users and start the carpooling network. So during the pilot in Vitoria, we decided to focus our efforts on industrial areas outside the city centers. As I said, Alava Technological Park and the UNDs. And I wanted to share to start the pilot. First, we target an area with limited or no access to public transport, because our vision of carpooling is a solution which extends the reach of public transport and which is not at all a competitor of public transport. So we are not targeting areas which are already well served by public transport. We also target areas with a significant number of employees, at least 1,000, and areas with limited parking spots, because we support companies in the management of their parking spot, and it's a good incentive to encourage people to carpool. What we did is that we adapted the Kairos mobility technology to the Spanish market, including the translation of the app in Spanish and Basque, the matching to be available in order for it to be available in Spain, and we created a website in Spanish and Basque to promote the service. We also received great media coverage at the launch of the service. It was a good support to promote it and to get users in the app at the launch. And now I would like to share with you concrete results, because we are really proud of this launch of this pilot, as within 5 weeks only, we already made more than 1,000 carpool rides in Vitoria with more than 100 different users. And I can tell you it's only the beginning, but we already saved 1.8 tons of CO2 emissions during this short pilot period. We also focus our efforts on peak hours, as the majority of our carpool trips are made in the morning and after work, and the average distance per trip is about 30 kilometers. And finally, I would like to conclude with a few key learnings that we have already identified, even though it is still the early stages of the project. Carpooling seems to be appropriate to improve access to suburban areas of the city where public transport is lacking. Our playbook, already deployed in France, Germany, and Denmark, to build a community of carpoolers, shows first results in Spain. It also confirms that it is important to have someone in place to understand mobility habits and get a deep understanding of the local context. And finally, we implemented financial incentives in Vitoria, and these financial incentives are key to initiate a change in daily habits and encourage people to test the service. And let me know, don't hesitate to contact me if you want more information on other projects we implemented in Europe.
Thank you very much, Anais, for your very comprehensive presentation. Wow, 1.8 tons of CO2 emissions reduced. That's impressive. Congratulations. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. We're just closing this webinar really quickly. So, Anais, thank you very much for your presentation. Anais is available for questions if there is any, and she's also available after the webinar to ask any of your inquiries. So once again, Anais, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. So to close this webinar today, we have one last ready to be implemented mobility solution. So Pinbike. Pinbike is a patented gamification solution that rewards cycling and public transport usage. Today with us, we have Ricardo Meo Evoli. Ricardo holds a degree in aerospace engineering from the Sapienza University of Rome, with experiences at the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid and TU Delft. Additionally, he has 7 years of experience in managerial and commercial roles, enriched by also a master's degree at MIT in business management applied to the implementation of machine learning and artificial intelligent systems. Ricardo is currently the commercial responsible at Pinbike. Ricardo, you have 7 minutes to close this webinar, so the stage is yours. Thank you very much.
My pleasure to be here. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we see your slides. We are.
Is a gamification platform to promote
Sorry, Ricardo, we're having some trouble listening to you. Maybe you can shift devices for your audio, or maybe we can try again with the sound. Can you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, it's
Can you hear me?
better.
Okay. So, as we're saying, bike is a unification platform that promotes sustainable mobility, and it is the only one that certifies every main transport that our mission is to promote sustainable mobility and to do so by rewarding directly the final users, so people who choose to travel with sustainable means.
Ricardo, sorry, we have sorry to interrupt you. Maybe you can shift your headsets. It's quite hard to hear you. And then we can, maybe it's better if you shift your sound recording device. Okay, I think we're having some troubles. I mean, online
Can you
events
hear me
are
now?
always. Yes, we can
So a
hear
bit
you now.
noisy where I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, go
So
ahead.
we promote sustainable mobility by rewarding directly the final users. And we have technologies and patents that are able to certify each mean of transport. This guarantees that the platform is anti-fraud, and where there is the intent of delivering economic incentives, we guarantee a high degree of security. It works through the use of an app where users can record their trip sessions and they can take part in challenges. It's also a tool for communicating with the municipality. And the municipality can send surveys to know the state of the infrastructure to their users. Um, it works with private bicycles with a hardware device that people can install really simply on their personal bikes, and this enables to track and monitor personal bicycles. But other than private ones, we can promote the use of shared micromobility like bicycles and e-scooters with software integrations. So this enables us to scale a project really, really fast and to gather a really high number of users very quickly. We can also promote the use of public transport with the installation of beacons on buses. We just recently launched a project in Lecce and in Braga in partnership with the EIT, where users are rewarded for using bus and also other means of transport. We have also features for carpooling, so people can offer and receive rides through our app, and this enables us to target schools and companies. So when we launch an initiative in a city, we can then involve schools and companies that want to join in the initiative and promote sustainable mobility for their employees or for their students that can go to the office or the school by using carpooling as well as the other means of transport. All those means of transport are tracked, and the data is gathered in one single platform where we can monitor like multimodal trips, and we can reward specifically each mean of transport with different points and different euros. But all the data is gathered in one single platform, and so it's one single gamification environment that is engaging and it's open to everyone. The rewards that we give out then are promoted through a network of local commercial activities. This way, also, apart from promoting sustainable mobility, we promote local trade and we ensure that the economic incentives remain in the community and are actually received twice because they're received firstly by our users and then by the shop owners. It's also it's free to join for commercial activities, but the municipality can ask the commercial activities to offer part of the discounts. This way, the burden of the economic incentives becomes much cheaper. Um, we reward also other action like bringing in users or completing a survey or attending a specific event. For example, if there's a concert and we expect that there will be criticalities in traffic, the promoter of the event can allocate a budget to push people to go to the event with sustainable means and not with their personal cars. All the data is then gathered in a dashboard where there's really detailed statistics, and it's and that can be filtered interactively by mean of transfer, by time frame, by age gap. So it's really powerful tools, and it can support data-driven investments. This is an example of the dashboard for one of our projects in Tallinn, where we can see highlighted in red the areas where there's more bicycle traffic, and this suggests maybe to invest on a bicycle path in that area. This is some of our past projects. We've done projects for public administration. We work with companies, and we're really active, and we look forward to bringing the initiative across Europe. Those are some of our numbers. We've avoided over 500 tons of CO2 and rewarded more than 370,000 euros in rewards. I'm available for questions, and feel free to ask everything and contact me.
Thank you very much, Ricardo, for your presentation. I'm all in favor of biking to concerts, and impressive 500 tons of CO2 emissions saved. Congratulations, Ricardo. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time. We reached the end of this webinar. So Ricardo is available for any questions if needed, and we can also, of course, introduce you after the event. So thank you very much, Ricardo, and I'll see you soon. So at this stage, you've known what are some of the most cost-effective sustainable urban mobility measures. You've heard about best practice in cities. You know the latest mobility innovations, and also you know how to finance that. So what's next? So if this knowledge is still ain't enough, this Thursday at the same time, from 10 to 12, we have another webinar, just like this one, but on hydrogen. The link has already been provided in the comments. And if not, you can also catch us at the we can have a chat with the Smart Cities Marketplace team at the Smart City Expo World Congress in Barcelona from the 7th to the 9th of November, where we host a lot of the activities, some interesting panels. So check out, or I think the link is also in the comments. So please check that out. In any case, if you want to enroll in one of our Smart Cities Marketplace activities or services, if you need support for your project, don't hesitate to fill the call for applications, and we will get back to you with our request for your most relevant services. So that's all from our side. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all the speakers, and I'll see you in the next webinar.